Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here for another This and That video. And for those of you who are new, a This and That video is simply a weekly vlog, sometimes semi-weekly depending on how busy I get, showing some of the projects I have going on to give you updates or answer questions on some recent videos that just published, or to let you know of some videos that are coming up, or to even update you or show you some new experiments I'm doing. So let's get started on today's This and That. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about, I have this pocket. It's actually a pocket to an apron that I'm working on, actually a bunch of them. I'm making 4 of these right now. And I'll show you what the finished product will look something like. The turquoise fabric is a little bit different of a print, but that was a pretty popular one that I did. And so I'm going to be putting that up on the store shortly. I wanted to bring this up because my sewing projects lately have been going very, very slow. And one of the big reasons why is that I'm trying to keep up on so many different things for the store, like the lip balms have been selling like crazy lately. The skin cream keeps selling at a pretty good clip. Keeping up on the chambers, and I'm going to talk more about that too, and various other things that we have going up on the store that I'm pretty spread thin on a lot of that stuff. But I am still taking custom orders for skirts and aprons, and or still making them to go up on the store. It's just some of that stuff has really kind of had to sit on hold for a little bit as I do some other things. And of course, I am still waiting for that electric washing machine, the new one, to arrive. And so I'm still using my off-grid setup. And the sad thing is my 1924 Ringer, I wore out the bearings already. Well, I shouldn't say already, because the thing is already almost 100 years old, but just in the time I've been using it, I've worn out the bearings. And so now I'm down to wringing my clothes out by hand. And so that's making it take even that much longer to get my laundry done each day. And I do a little bit every day so that I don't have a whole bunch to do all in one day. That's actually easier for me. So anyway, that's what's going on there for people who are curious or go to the store and say, oh, I never see your skirts and aprons. Well, even when I am making a lot of them and able to keep making them on a consistent basis, they usually sell out so fast that when people go to the store to find them, they're usually gone. The same goes for the chambers. Now, the main issue there is that we've just had a heck of a time being able to keep them in stock because of this part right here. We order some from Amazon. They keep putting limits on us. We're only able to get a few in at a time. And other places that we've tried to do bigger orders from have been taking like 6 weeks to get to us. We're still waiting on a big order we placed a month and a half ago to arrive. And once that gets here, we'll be able to keep them pretty well stocked for a while, but it's really at the mercy of that. As soon as they sell out on the store, then immediately I have people messaging me and emailing me, when are you going to have these in stock? Why can't I find them on your store? Well, if you don't see an item on the store, it's because it's temporarily out of stock. So the best thing I can say is keep checking back. At this point, I can't even give an estimate of exactly when these items will be up there because we just never know. So just be patient. You know, we are going to keep making them and keep putting them up there as long as people are still interested. It's just the waiting for us on all the parts to come in so we can get them made and then put them up on the store. Anyway, so on to some of the other topics. So right here, you'll see these brown jars here. They might not look very pretty. I haven't made it a lot lately, but it's one of Patrick's more favorite meals because it was what he grew up on, was beans and cornbread. So that would be a white cornbread with no sugar added, not the Johnny cake that here in the north that we're more familiar with. And it's crispy, and here's a picture I took of the last one I made, just a chunk of it. So usually you brown it real good all the way around, and again, it's made with a white cornmeal and buttermilk and no sugar added to it. People like to use different types of beans for their what I call hillbilly or Tar Heel beans. Some people like to use navy beans or just various other beans. I just use the pinto beans. First I soak and rinse, and then I try to cook them for about 2 days. And then very simple spices, just a little salt and pepper, and maybe a couple herbs like sage, a little bit of thyme. Sometimes people will throw in some ham hocks or things like that. I added a little bit of turkey broth from last year's Thanksgiving turkey to these ones. And then I always put in my mixed greens blend. Now, a lot of people like to add collard greens to their beans and cornbread. And so since my mixed greens blend has a little bit of everything, collards, kale, dandelion leaves, even grape leaves and strawberry leaves and more, then I just put a handful of that into the batch when I'm making it, so we're getting those good greens and minerals that are in those greens in there. I haven't done an updated video in a couple of years, but I do have the one from 2018. It does change up a little bit each year depending on how much of each of the different things I'm collecting and dehydrating, but at least you can get an idea by watching that video there. And I have lots of jars of mixed greens because of that, and it goes in just about everything. So anyway, this time, since I decided to make just a really massive, in fact I had 2 big pots of it, and then we ate on it for a couple nights, and then I took the rest and canned it up. Because it does take time to cook up the beans. There's not a lot of work involved, it's just the time it takes to cook. So I figured it would be nice to just go ahead and make a huge batch and then can up the rest like this, so that the next time we want to have beans and cornbread, all I got to do is whip up a batch of the cornbread to go with the beans and then heat up the beans. So that will make it easy. So that was a canning project I got done this week, and that'll be nice. I don't usually do a lot of instant meals when it comes to canning, but with the way things are going, and especially with being as busy as I am, things that we eat on a pretty regular basis, I'm getting back into doing more of the instant meal by doing stuff like this. So I've canned some meatballs, homemade meatballs. I've canned the beans like this. I've canned some turkey vegetable soup, or chicken vegetable soup, that is. And chili is the one thing I always do every year, is I'll make a big bunch of chili, kind of like what I did here. Make 2 big pots of it and then can that up. That's our fast food for when we have really busy days, or I simply just forget to take something out of the freezer and there's no leftovers left in the fridge. So consider the types of meals that you're most likely to eat out of a jar that just require a little bit of heating. Personally, I don't get too crazy about doing a lot of different things like that, but if it's something I know I'm going to eat, or I'm wanting to clean out some space in the freezer, like making the homemade meatballs and getting some more of that ground beef out of there, because I have a lot that I'm still trying to work through, and then make more room in the freezer for other things, you know, pulling those out by several pounds at a time, using some of it right away, and then using the rest either to cook up and dehydrate and then store in canning jars on the shelf, or to can in the form of the canned meatballs, or you could even do meatloaf. I've never done that one, so don't ask me how. I don't even really have a video on how to do the meatballs, but basically I just make the meatballs like I normally would, put them in the jars, and then add some broth or water to it, and then just can them for 90 minutes, or 75 minutes for pints, 90 minutes for quarts. That's how I do it. So let's move on to some other projects going on. So right here is a jar, and I'm keeping it in this bowl, even though I'm now keeping it in the fridge, just because this is a fermented product, and it is beet kvass. It is actually hard-boiled eggs that I fermented in beet kvass that I'd already made. So I have a video coming out later on the beet kvass. This particular beet kvass is a pretty simple process, and just like with almost all of my fermented products, I always like to use my fermentation starter, my homemade fermentation starter, which is super easy to make out of pretty much anything you already have on hand. And if you're interested in how to do that so you can have one ready to go when the beet kvass video comes out, I'll go ahead and link to the video on my most thorough video I have on how to make a fermentation starter and how to use it. So one of my favorite things to do with the beet kvass, and I forgot to mention this in the video other than throwing a photo in there, is taking some hard-boiled eggs and then fermenting those in the beet kvass. It makes a real beautiful hard-boiled egg, and to me personally, it's really tasty. Now, if you don't like beets, you might not like it at all, but I love it. It's actually my favorite way to ferment the eggs. And so to this one, I did add some red pepper flakes to get some spice to it. So anyway, I'll put a picture here because I'm going to have a couple of these for lunch. And so you can see what it looks like out of the jar and what it looks like sliced open. And they actually make a very beautiful egg. And you can see right back here in these 2 jars, these are going to be going back in the refrigerator soon. These are the 2 different fermentation starters I have. I always like to have 2 at a time. Let's say I use one and then I get it topped off. I like to let it sit for about 24 hours before I use it again. And so I like to have a backup one if I decide to ferment something else in that same day. So that's why those are sitting there, and I have 2 of them out. And then sometimes I just like to pull them both out if I haven't fermented anything in a while, and feed it a little bit of sugar, and then let it get up to room temperature and get real bubbly so I can make sure it's good and active and lively for when I need it, and then store it back in the refrigerator so I don't have to feed it every day. If you keep your fermentation starters out, you have to feed them every day to keep them alive. And then back here, some of you already would have seen my last, I think it was in a last This and That video, I had started a batch of vanilla mead, and then behind that, the newer batch I just started yesterday is strawberry mead. Now, it might not look real red, especially from this angle, but part of that again is because I'm working through this massive bucket of honey I had bought quite a number of years ago, raw honey. But what happens with raw honey is not only does it crystallize with time, like, well, any honey will do that, but it can also darken, but the flavor is still good. And so I've been restocking my honey supply with fresh honey, but in the meantime trying to use up some of the older stuff and get that bucket out of there. And so that's why I've been making a lot of mead and finding I really like to just stop the process early. So what I have is more of a fermented soda. So it's got that nice sweetness to it from the honey and the flavor from the fruit that I'm adding to it, as well as it's got a very low alcohol content. So I can have a little glass of it without it affecting me at all. And then some of the stuff I might let ferment longer and finish out the whole process, so it's more like a glass of wine. Those are the things I like to save for using for making extracts, tinctures, or even for barter. Oh, and if you're interested in how I make mead, I have a playlist on how to make wine in general, but I do have a video just on mead making, and the main difference is mead is made with honey and water, and then you can add fruit to it for flavoring if you choose, but just plain mead is nothing but honey, water, and whatever fermentation starter you choose to use, or it can even be made without any fermentation starter. I've just never done it that way. I just always like to use the starter to ensure I'm going to get a good ferment. So anyway, I'll link to the mead making video down below. Now right here, what I have going on is I just jarred these up, and these are some pistachios. So I've been getting all kinds of different nuts and seeds put up in my food storage. I always have had some, but I've been really increasing the variety that I have, and I love roasted pistachios. So I've been getting these from Costco online, and then just vacuum sealing them into these green olive jars. So I love these green olive jars, and now this is mostly what I'm using. So I've got a lot of walnuts stored up in these, and then the pistachios is the other thing I'm putting in these. And since this isn't the kind of jar that would work with a food saver top, I've been using my vacuum chamber that Patrick made me. So I have quite a few videos on this if you're interested in it. And again, I mentioned it earlier, it may or may not be out on the store when you see this video. We may have a few up by then. I'm hoping in a couple days we should have at least a few more up. But the thing I really like about this chamber is any size jar from a pint up to a quart, and as long as it's not wider than a quart jar like this, I can seal. And even jars like this that aren't your standard canning jar, I can use that and vacuum seal it up in my chamber. And I just did this a little bit ago, and it's very well sealed. In fact, this would take, I actually have to have Patrick open these once I've sealed them like this, because they're very hard to open. And so there are some tricks to it though to get it right, no matter which one you're starting with. So you want to make sure, basically with any of your lids, when you go to use that chamber, you put the lid on only that tight. You don't tighten it down like this. It's just like you would with a Harvest Guard lid for canning or a Tattler lid for canning. You just put it on there and turn it until the jar moves, and don't get it any tighter than that. Because if you get the lid on too tight, then it's really difficult to vacuum the air out of the jar, and then it's not going to seal. So that's a little trick on that. And speaking of vacuum sealing, so the other thing I wanted to talk about was the chicken, the dehydrated chicken. So I think it was another This and That video, but where I talked about dehydrating chicken. And the problem with this is, now people did tell me that if you pressure cook the chicken first and you dehydrate it up, it rehydrates better than chicken that's simply been roasted and then dehydrated like I always do. So I always cook my chicken either on the wood stove in the wintertime or in the solar oven in the summertime. And I was cooking up a bunch of them, getting them out of the freezer and then dehydrating the meat up. Now, to eat it straight out of the jar, yeah, it's a little dry, but it's crunchy. Sometimes it's really crispy, sometimes it's kind of hard. And I love it. To me, it's just a delicious snack. But as far as cooking with it, I did try it a couple different ways. It turned out pretty good in the enchiladas I made, but I had to cook it for a long time. So what I did was I cooked it a little bit in just some water the first day. Then the next day when I went to make the enchiladas, I made the enchilada sauce, put that into the enchilada sauce, and then cooked it with the rest of the sauce because I like to cook the sauce for a couple hours. And that did help to rehydrate it to a degree, but it still wasn't fully rehydrated like chicken should be. So one subscriber gave a really good suggestion. So if you're wanting to add chicken or chicken flavoring to your meals and you did it this way where you didn't pressure cook it first, then you can just take it and you can process it up in your blender and turn it into a powder and add it to your foods that way. Okay, so one more thing to talk about, and that was I wanted to answer some questions. Now, when I did the video that just published recently about the hair oil, this is supposed to, it's for your scalp, and it's supposed to help stimulate hair growth. And I'll link to that video down below in the description box. Again, don't forget to click on either show more, which will be right down over here below my channel name, or if you're on a smart device, a little gray triangle right over here in this corner just under the video. If you click on either one of those, it opens up the description box. So anyway, here's the oil I've got infusing, and I have been actually pretty good at remembering to shake it. So if you try to remember to shake it every day, that's just going to help it infuse better. But even if you forget and you put it away in a dark cabinet somewhere and forget about it, it'll be fine. It does just help if you can shake it, just increase that infusion a little bit better. But here's the older one, the one I'm still working through, and I forgot to say in the video and still didn't clarify it enough in the text I thought to add in later. And how do you use it? Well, I simply pour a little bit into the palm of my hand, and then I take my fingers, put it in my fingertips, and then I just work it into my scalp like this. This is after I wash my hair and before it's dried. I don't ever use a hair dryer or anything. I just let my hair dry naturally, and then I just work it into my scalp like that, and I leave it. So to me, it's a leave-in treatment, and it doesn't come out until the next time I wash my hair. Really, a lot of it's going to depend on how oily your hair and your skin naturally are. And you typically are going to see this with anyone that has curlier hair. Our skin and our hair is usually going to be more on the dry side. So again, adjusting the ratios like of the castor oil, or even leaving the castor oil out if you have very oily skin and hair. But for someone like us, we can add a little bit of castor oil and it doesn't affect, you know, we usually don't have an issue with it being too heavy or too oily. And again, I just leave it in there, and if I have any excess on my hands, I just work it into the ends. Now keep in mind though, if you're going to do that, work it into your ends, that there's red pepper in there, and if it gets into your eyes, it can burn. So just be careful with that. Okay, well, that's it for my this and that for this week. And again, check out the videos in the description box down below. And if you have any other questions, go ahead and put them in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to answer them. And sometimes it'll be simply just linking you back to a video I already have. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.